多くの方が、日本の方であるというふうに思いますが、今回は英語でさせてください。そして、時折日本語でまとめるということにしていきたいと思います。よろしいでしょうかね。はい。それでは画面共有の方をさせていただきます。見えていらっしゃいますか？ Okay. So, shall we start? Good. Thank you. Okay. So, good evening, everybody. I am Father Yosuke Sakai. Seemingly many of you know me, and I have known you anyway. So I'm teaching here clinical psychology and psychotherapy at the Pontifical Gregorian University here in Rome. When it says pontifical in Japanese, kyoko choritsu, it means something of the Vatican, the property of Vatican. Okay, so it's or the Holy See. So it is a Catholic university like Sophia University, but it's established by and directly under the Holy See's authority. Okay, so the Gregorian University is entrusted to Jesuits for the education and formation of the students from more than 120 countries. Okay, so in this presentation, I would like to share something about Father Arrupe. He was known for his big heart and cheerfulness, but it was not a clown-like buoyancy, but it had depth and dedication. His life can be a beacon for us, Sophians, as we strive to live our university's motto, men and women for others with others. So far, okay, more or less. Could you follow what I'm talking? Anyway, so, アルペ神様のこの喜びを持って与える人という側面について、今日は、ささやかなプレゼンをさせていただきたいと思います。Okay, so first, why Pedro Arrupe? Okay, Father Arrupe had to take the reins, which is responsibility, as the general superior of the Society of Jesus, Jesuits, in the most confusing and critical years in the Catholic Church of the 20th century and also in the world. By saying general superior, well, this is a very specific term. Well, simply saying a big boss or a commander-in-chief for the Jesuits. Okay? By searching through his kaleidoscopic life experiences, it becomes possible to present a clear model of his path toward a cheerful giver for others. Of course, it is quite impossible to present his whole life in detail within a limited time. Okay, so I just picked up some significant events and points of his life, right? So this presentation aims to share that some essence of the depth and breadth of his life can be identified for us to find our own way of proceeding as men and women for others, wherever we may find ourselves. So now let's move on. Some chronology. Now we shall go through some significant events in his life. I'm going to present some selected ones. I will not explain everything in detail, okay? Sorry. Yeah. November 14th, 1907. Okay. He was born in Bilbao as the last of 5 children and the only boy. Where is Bilbao? Bilbao is the capital of the Basque country. Note that technically speaking, Father Arrupe was a Basque, not a Spaniard. Okay? Basque country has the very unique identity, culture, and also language, very different from Spanish ones. So now it's part of Spain, yes, but Basque conserved its own uniqueness. So Father Arrupe is a Basque. Okay, please be reminded that one. Okay, and then he moved to he studied medicine in Madrid for 4 years. He didn't finish the study of medicine because he entered the Jesuit novitiate in Loyola. And as you see, the world, this part, 1914, as we know very well, the First World War began. Okay, and 1917, and the Communist Revolution in Russia happened. In 1929, the Great Depression, Daikyoko in Japanese. Okay, so as you see, this is context, historical context, when Father Arrupe was born and grew up, especially he spent in his childhood and youth in Europe. This is a surrounding situation of the time. Okay. So, as you see, those February, for example, 1932, he left Spain for exile in Belgium. So from 1932 till 38, this 5-6 years range, he had to move one place to another due to the political instability and persecution in Spain then, and war in Europe. For example, as you see, he left Spain for exile, okay, in Belgium, okay, because in his own country, Spain, the Jesuits are banned, and there's a decree to dissolve the Society of Jesus. So he had to exile, he had to move away from Spain in order to continue his formation, to live, to survive. Okay. For example, so from Spain to Belgium, from Belgium to Valkenburg is Holland, from Holland to USA, Kansas, from Kansas, USA to Ohio, USA, and finally he arrived Tokyo, Japan, 1938. Okay. So as you know, the situation wise, the Europe finds it's in turmoil because 1933 Hitler is named chancellor in Germany, and 36 the Spanish Civil War began, and same year the Second Sino-Japanese War, Nichiu Senso, began. Okay, so the world is in turmoil and lots of wars and confusions and persecutions. Okay, so Arrupe was always in the middle of the confusion and turmoil and war-torn part of the world. Okay, this is very a significant experience for him, and that experience still continue when he arrived in Japan, because Japan is in the middle of the war. Okay, let's see what happened and what he did before the war. Okay, so 1940, he was assigned in Yamaguchi Kyokai, for the parish apostolate. So he became parish priest. But that year, 1941, as you know, December 8th, there was a Pearl Harbor, attack, and Japan and USA entered the war, right? So he was imprisoned, incarcerated, and interrogated by the police, Tokko, suspected of espionage. 彼はスパイだと疑われたんですね。そして特攻警察によって捕まえられて、1ヶ月間の独房でのこの、牢獄生活を余儀なくされます。そのことについては後で触れますね。And then 1942, he was released and he moved to Hiroshima, Nagatsuka. And his new mission is the Master of Novices. Okay? So, as you know, the most tragic and historic event, 1945, August 6th. There was atomic bomb in Hiroshima. He witnessed and he survived the atomic bomb in Hiroshima. Okay? So this is his life before and after and during the war. Okay? It's very delicate and very, tensed period of Japan, but he was there. He happened to be there in Chugoku-Chiho, Yamaguchi, and Hiroshima. Okay. Then, for example, 1958, he became the first provincial of Japan of the Jesuit Society of Jesus in Japan province. Okay. Then he took that leadership more than 10 years. And then 1965, there was the 31st General Congregation. Okay, what is the General Congregation? This is the most important meeting, international gathering and meeting for the Jesuits. So the representatives of the all provinces, countries, regions gathered together to discuss important and relevant issues of the world of the church, to decide their take, their effort, further commitment. Okay, so it doesn't occur regularly. Okay, it depends. It's according to the signs of the time. Okay, so for example, 1965, the 31st General Congregation began. Why? Father Janssens, the General Superior, Commander-in-Chief, then died. So they had to choose new Superior General. So Father Arrupe went there and he was elected 28th Superior General of the Society of Jesus. Okay? So since the 1965, he began his leadership position in the Society of Jesus. 1965年から、73年、今見ていきますけども、73年ずっとですが、約、15年以上にわたってアルペシムさんはこれから総長としての役割を果たしていくことになります。And then 32nd General Congregation was convoked in 1973. Okay? なぜならば時代が非常に大きな世界中が大きな変わり目にあって様々な混乱が起きていきますね。教会の中だけでもなくその世界中でいろいろな体制に対する問題、組織、そして個人のアイデンティティといろいろなこと、それが哲学的なレベルでも、また社会的なレベルでも、個人の内側のレベルでも、様々な落ち着かない時期を地球が、人類が送ることになります。それに合わせて、the 32nd General Convocation was convoked. Okay? And just about a month ago, he gave his famous discourse. Later, I will talk about that, he gave his famous discourse on men and women for others in Valencia, Spain, for the 10th International Congress of Jesuit Alumni of Europe. And 1980, November 14, that his birthday, by the way, Arrupe created Jesuit Refugee Service. Okay, so the world is also as a great turmoil and great change. Okay, so the 96 one, erection of the Berlin Wall, no, and not war at wall. Sorry, that's wall. And the Vatican Council began, and civil rights movement, all sorts and so forth and so forth, and move on. So the time of his leadership is also world is moving and confusing, you know. Then 1981, this is also a critical point for his life because he suffers cerebral thrombosis, which is no kessen, and he lost large measure of communication ability and mobility on his right side. Okay, so because of that, he couldn't continue his leadership. So next year, there was a convocation of the 33rd General Congregation. Okay, so September 3, Arrupe's resignation was accepted. So nearly 10 years, okay, he was not literally bedridden, but he lost, major ability of communication, and then he was not able to express what he wanted to say. Okay, so he became very silent, and he spent the rest of his life in prayer and contemplation. And he died 1991, February 5th. February 5th is here in the Roman calendar is a day for 26 martyrs in Japan. 日本では2月6日、ちょうどアガタが記念日と重なるので、2月6日に日本では、祝っていますが、ローマの典礼では2月5日が、日本26世人の、記念日になっていますね。その日本26世人の記念日にアルペ神父は、ローマの総本部の、インファーマリーで亡くなりました。1991 it was. Okay. So that's the so far okay. Good. So he was So he was immersed in both Western and Eastern cultures. He experienced differing values and traditions. He absorbed and integrated them into a new disposition distinctively his own. And furthermore, he narrated historic events as one who witnessed and participated in them, such as the atomic bomb and Japanese war, right? In Taiheiyo Senso, and survived. All the experiences, encounters, and reflections that influenced him, transformed him profoundly. By the way, this photo was taken around 1940 or 41, okay, with the parishioners of Yamaguchi Kyokai. 山口教会の信徒の方々と撮ったまだ若かりし頃のアルペ神父さんの写真です。So here, I would like to present 3 points. 3つのポイントについて皆さんと分かち合っていきましょう。Which represent the characteristics of his life and action. I think these characteristics are intertwined, in a way inseparable, to form his unique personality and to portray his lived witness. Okay? 今から3つの点について皆さんと分かち合います。So he is a man of service and power. He is a man of prayer and discernment, and a man for others and with others. I like his smiling, this very beautiful, very charming smile, okay? So let's see the man of service power, okay? So power serves as leadership and authority, so much so that power could lure the people's minds and hearts away from the good and bring them to suffer in the case of its misuse. The abuse and misuse of power, authority, in leadership can occur anytime and anywhere, as we witness even in our time. Therefore, power needs a healthy and humble perspective proceeding from self-awareness. Power、日本語で言えば、権威とか権力とか、いろいろな訳し方ができますが、非常に、デリケートなものなんですね。使いようによっては危険なものになり得るということです。So, the first and foremost, a leader needs to realize what he is and who he is and accept his or her identity and responsibility. In other words, he has to be integrated, okay? And he accepts them wholeheartedly, including his strengths and gaps. It is the same now as of old. Paradoxically speaking, only people know their inadequacies and their limitations that can learn and grow. That leadership is fundamentally service as affirmed in the gospel. Anyone who wants to become great among you must be your servant. Anyone who wants to be the first among you must be your slave. Taken from the gospel according to St. Matthew. Okay. Power needs to be backed with genuineness and humbleness. Father Arrupe seemed ready to learn from others. Genuineness never shuts off the desire of learning, changing, and growing. Father Arrupe was going to be an amiable, affectionate, open-minded, understanding, and friendly leader. So I would say Father Arrupe's approach is like the authority of service advocated and demonstrated by Pope Francis. Okay? アルペ神父さんの、権威の奉仕のありようと、教皇フランシスコの権威の奉仕のありようとは非常に似ている部分があるなと思います。また後でそれについては少し触れますね。Yeah, I mean, there's, in English, I would say, so many of you might remember Pope Francis' visit to our university, right? And it was 2019. And it was just my personal idea, my personal perception and impression that I could see, similar characteristics between them in Father Arrupe and Pope Francis in terms of attitudes and values, even the content of messages and actions. Okay, I think this similarities, commonalities are quite impressive. Okay. So Father Arrupe was learning to grow in power and authority in the surrounding situations. Okay. Father Arrupe's method, similarly, was not top-down, but rather each member was encouraged to act in a Jesuit manner, sharing trust and freedom. It is called cura personalis in the Jesuit tradition. Okay. For example, he said in the 33rd General Congregation of the Society of Jesus, which is his last congregation that he participated as a General Superior, and then the very last moment of his tenure, excuse me, he said, God's generosity toward me has been boundless. For my part, I have tried to respond, knowing well that all his gifts were to be shared with each and every Jesuit, every member. This has been my persistent effort. 一番最後にアルペ神父が言った言葉なんですね、これはね。いただいたものはすべて神からの恵みであって、それを私はすべての人とできるだけね、多くの部分を分かち合おうと努力したと。そう言っているんですよね。So this was almost his last public message. So it came to my mind, today in the USA, there is a kind of a historic transition from one president to the new president, right? And we all have seen the very dramatic and even traumatic events during the last 2 weeks in the US Capitol. So as we saw these, transitions, there were lots of resistance, lots of confusions, but they taught us, I suppose, many things. Many things about humanity. For example, allurement of power, human fragility, humility, injustice, anger, hate, reconciliation, and even resilience and hope. They reflect, respect, and represent our humanity, okay, in good ways and also negative ways. I would not comment further, but that's we witnessed, So cura personalis, as I said, which is Latin, means care for the person. It concerns and cares for the personal growth of the whole person. This proposes a commitment to promoting human dignity and care for the person's mind, body, and spirit. Okay? So this is very significant perspective of our education at Sophia University. Cura personalis というのは、これはラテン語なんですけども、イエス会の教育の中でとても大切なものなんですね。人を全人的にケアしていく、関わっていく、大切にしていくという部分です。これはイエス会の大学でとても大切されている部分ですね。So, Father Arrupe advocated the use of Christian humanistic power in such service. This is not merely a philosophical remark, but also summary of the service, which was characteristics of Father Arrupe's authority. So now move on, man of prayer and discernment. He writes, there was an important personal event, a 1-month imprisonment in Yamaguchi. Without anything except a sleeping mat, I spent days and nights in the December cold, entirely alone. I was tormented by the uncertainty of the reason for my imprisonment. Many were the things I learned during this time: the science of silence, of solitude, of severe and austere poverty, of inner dialogue with the guest of my soul. I believe this was the most instructive month of my entire life. これはアルペシムさんが先ほども言ったように1ヶ月間の山口の特攻の、刑務所施設で、独房に入れられた時の経験について振り返って語っているんですね。とても苦しかったと、孤独の中に打ちひしがれたと。ただこの中で非常に多くのことを学んだんだと。特にこの私の魂の、ね、内なるこの来客、きっとそれは神のことなんでしょうか、キリストのことなんでしょうかとの深いこの、沈黙の中での語らいを経験することができたと彼は言っています。So this is also from his reflections. So he said it's about his experience in Hiroshima. Okay, we did the only thing that could be done in the presence of such mass slaughter, which is atomic bomb in Hiroshima. We fell on our knees and prayed for guidance as we were destitute of all human help. What could I do? Where to begin? Again, I fell on my knees and implored God's help. It was then that He helped me in a very special way, not with medications, but with a simple and essential idea. We quickly decided to clean the house, the novitiate, as best we could and try to accommodate as many of the sick and wounded as we could possibly fit inside. We were able to take only 150. Okay. As you see this photo of the chapel, it is a main chapel of the present-day Jesuit retreat house in Hiroshima, Nagatsuka, Hiroshima. This very place, この和室で all the accommodations and happened. So it became field hospital. This very chapel was the field hospital for Arrupe. Okay, it's quite big West type. Okay, so this was a personal account of Pedro Arrupe with regard to his experience of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima. His name became well known in the Jesuit world. And after World War II, even young Jorge Bergoglio, do you know who he is? The Pope Francis, his real name, Jorge Bergoglio, then a novice, was inspired by Arrupe's telling about the Japanese mission and the Hiroshima atomic bomb. When Arrupe, then he was the provincial of Japan, visited the novitiate in Cordoba, Argentina in 1959. So Arrupe's telling of his story was thorough and powerful testimony. It was no wonder that young Jorge was animated by a desire to go to the Japan mission. Of course, it was not pushed through due to his health condition, but young Francis met Arrupe in person and listened to the testimony. And he was so much inspired and animated to go to Japan. Okay, so no wonder he was very happy to visit Japan almost more than 1 year ago. Okay. So on August 7, 1945, the day following the bombing, Arrupe and the other Jesuits were boldly engaged in giving aid to the wounded and were taking part in relief activities in the burn zone in the city center of Hiroshima. Using his medical skills, because he studied medicines, but with the very limited medical supplies, Arrupe and his company gave the treatment to more than 150 people who were brought into the novitiate in the suburb of Hiroshima. And the novitiate was transformed into a field hospital. Okay, a field hospital. This is Pope Francis' favorite image of the church. Okay. 教皇フランシスコはこの野戦病院としての教会という言葉をとても大切にするんですよね。教会は野戦病院のようにならなければいけないよと。現代の野戦病院なんだと。Arrupe and his company embodied mercy in the blasted city of Hiroshima, manifesting goodness in a palpable form when such love and compassion were desperately needed. Okay? They prayed and took action for others in need. This was a moment of discernment for them. Discernment is not an act of daydreaming, but it leads to a concrete action. Okay? So in the midst of the devastation caused by the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, the first response of Arrupe and his fellow Jesuits was prayer. They fell on their knees and prayed for guidance as they were destitute of all human help. So prayerfulness and faith in God was the dynamo and powerhouse sustaining Arrupe's actions. もちろんそのような、大変な状況に置かれた場合に私たちはこう戸惑いますよね、うろたえますよね。アルペ神父もきっとそうだと思います。ただその時に彼がその混乱や恐れの中にとらわれてしまうのではなくて、祈ったということ。祈ったことで新しい光が導きが与えられたんだという経験を彼は語っています。ですから、この祈りというのもとても大切なポイントです。アルペ神父にとって。彼が祈りの人と言われるゆえんはそこにあるのかなと思います。So let's move on. There's a man and women for others and with others. In Hiroshima, Arrupe felt the magnitude of the groans and pains of the wounded and longed for God's mediation amid that human misery. He never forgot this moment. This existential experience, etched on his memory, later produced another fruit in response to the plight of Indo-Chinese refugees. On November 13th, 1980, Arrupe announced the birth of the Jesuit Refugee Service, JRS. He gave a talk on August 6, 1981, as he visited a refugee camp in Thailand, referring to the situation of the refugees. He said, "This is like Hiroshima." Okay? So on both occasions, Arrupe was shocked and saddened in the face of misery and agony. Nevertheless, he did not despair as a result of such devastation. Rather, he grappled tenaciously and hopefully with human affliction. And he carried out his mission with cheerfulness and generosity based on his trusting devotion. Arrupe, feeling a craving for supernatural assistance, celebrated the Mass with the wounded, and the novitiate become field hospital, finding in the liturgy that God became most near to those who were present. Arrupe proclaimed to them, the wounded, Dominus vobiscum, in Latin, meaning the Lord be with you. たくさんの人々が苦しんでこれからどうしたらいいんだという時に彼はその人たちと共にミサを捧げたと言われていますね。そしてその時に彼は信頼を持って、そして本当に深いところから出る、信仰を持って主はあなたたちと共にと言ったと。So now let's move on the fruit of the Jesuit education, men and women for others with others. So let me read, this short description of what he said in the alumni gathering in 1973 in Valencia, Spain. He said, so at the time the all alumni are male, so he used just man, but that it could be applied to all women, okay? So what kind of man or woman is needed today by the church, by the world? A man or a woman who is a man for others. That is my shorthand description of him. A man for others. But does this not contradict the very nature of man? Is not a man being for himself, gifted with intelligence that endows him with power? Does he not tend to control the world, making himself its center? Is this not the vocation, the history of man? Yes, man or woman gifted with conscience, intelligence, and powers is indeed a center. But center, called to go out himself, to give himself to others in love, which is his definitive and all-embracing dimension, that which gives meaning to all his other dimensions. Only he who loves fully realizes himself as a man. To the extent that he shuts himself off from others, man does not become more of a person, he becomes less. The man or woman who lives only for his own interest not only provides nothing for others, he does worse. He tends to accumulate in exclusive fashion more and more knowledge, more and more power, more and more wealth, thus denying inevitably to those weaker than himself their proper share of the God-given means for human development. As you listen, as you read through his message, very powerful message, and it is very relevant even today's world. Today's world is not about USA, not about Japan, but all over the world. Okay? So our university motto, men and women for others, with others, came from Father Arrupe's very speech of this. Jesuit education aims to form youths, men and women for others in today's world. How? That's what you're doing in this university, and cultivating skills and sharing your gifts with others. Your majors, minors, club and circle activities, part-time jobs, friendship, etc., could form you as men and women for others in any way that is possible, sometimes beyond your expectations and plans. So Father Arrupe taught us that the person who lives for others is one who offers oneself generously, and that fostering the solidarity of living together is at the root of Jesuit education. The experience of Jesuit education for those who participate in it is an effective opportunity to grow with a sense of service. Okay, now let us listen to his own voice for just a few minutes. Okay. Can you hear? Can you hear the voice? 声聞こえますか？聞こえませんか？聞こえない？
You can appreciate the tremendous dynamism in the church today. In that comes Arrupe energetically.
聞こえますか？聞こえません？
聞こえています。
聞こえてますか？はい。
We are in a very interesting moment in history. Today we have a challenge that perhaps never had in society. You can appreciate the tremendous dynamism in the church today. And that comes for the tremendous change, social change, technological change in the world. We have to think about the tremendous progress of the world today, illuminated by faith. And that is very interesting. The people have so many new problems, but no answers. We have to be very careful to see what are the changes in the world, because that will be for us also change on the service. But not only that, because also we are in the middle of the world. Therefore, that supports for us a tremendous responsibility to adapt our spirituality to the real needs of today. We have to heal the poor or to help the third world, or we have to be much more international in our activity. Christ is the redeemer of the whole man, immaterially. Therefore, we have to see how to combine, how to integrate the salvation of the whole man. Today, what the world needs are people completely devoted, unselfish, working for the others. I would say the Jesus men should be men of Amen and Alleluia. Amen is because to do always the will of God. And Alleluia because making the will of God that you should be very happy. And that is, I think, the motto of the Jesus of today. Amen, Alleluia. I will go. Like it. Very good.
Okay. So it's very rare film that you could ever watch and listen to his voice and his figure, not just a photograph, but it's an emotion film. Anyway, so let's move on to our summary. Cheerful giver for others. What is cheerfulness? Where does it come from? It is not about someone who is an happy-go-lucky type, okay? Not even an extrovert, not just an optimistic, without any apprehension or fear. No, it is someone who can dream, hope, and cheer despite fear, difficulties, and limitation. It is called magnanimity. Here I put the Spanish word, gran ánimo y liberalidad. This was taken from the spiritual exercise of St. Ignatius Loyola because he used the word. And Arrupe used to put a special emphasis on gran ánimo y liberalidad. Okay? And this word can be translated as great courage, gran ánimo, oinar yuki, And liberalidad could be generosity. In Japanese, garyō. So it encourages us to be more audacious in sharing. Okay, in Latin, could be magis. Okay, you might have heard of it. Magis. Okay, audacious in sharing. More audacious sharing. This Ignatian phrase expressed Arrupe's very well. This phrase captured his magnanimity, his extensive generosity. Courage and magnanimity are deeply rooted in his trust in God's guide. Okay. So, summary. Service is concrete. Saint Ignatius of Loyola said, love ought to manifest itself in deeds rather than in words. The prudent and just operation of power is not impulsive or reactive or susceptible, but self-giving and humble. Prayer is not just about religious piety, but also and even more trustingly waiting for God's guidance, but at the same time actively dedicating one's life to witnessing to God's love to others. So in that sense, he's a man of prayer. Okay? He's not just a pious person. And as Pope Francis said, mystical dimension of discernment never defines its edges and does not complete the thought. The Jesuit must be a person whose thought is incomplete in the sense of open-end thinking. So discernment is not static, but dynamic and growing. Okay, so Father Arrupe is encouraging us to become a man and women of discernment. Okay, that we contemplate things, okay, in ourselves through the filter of our heart and our experiences, but not just, for the static, disposition. No, it is for the action. Okay, so contemplative in action. So to be men and women for others is a matter of courage and magnanimity. To make this world more human, more loving, more compassionate, and better with our involvement and commitment. We, as Sophians, are called to be cheerful, hopeful, and generous givers of our lives and talents for others, especially those who are forgotten, marginalized, and labeled in today's world. So the value of men and women for others embodies a spirit of providing service to those in need and standing with them. We, Sophians, are encouraged to pursue justice on behalf of all persons. Okay, so this is the message of Father Arrupe. So let me conclude with a prayer of Father Arrupe. Grant me, O Lord, to see everything now with new eyes, to discern and test the spirits that help me read the signs of the times, to relish the things that are yours and to communicate them to others. Give me clarity of understanding that you gave Ignatius. Amen. はい、これで私のpresentation, I will conclude and finish my presentation